Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel Ink and Pages. This video is going to be my winter reading wrap up. So I have 8 books to touch on in this video and they're a very mixed bag. I have a couple of 4 stars and 1 5 stars to talk about, and also a couple of 2 stars and a 1 star book to talk about. So nothing was middle of the road, nothing was just okay. It was all just highs and lows, very much all over the place. So firstly, I have the last 2 books I read in 2020 in December, starting with Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas. And honestly, even talking very much about the plot of this book, or even like mentioning the main character's name at this point, is a spoiler. So if you haven't read past the 2nd book of the series, A Crown of Midnight, just like skip this whole section, because I'm not going to be sly. I'm not going to avoid saying things that could spoil you for previous books, because I feel like all of BookTube read this by now, if they were going to. But anyway, this is book 5 in the Throne of Glass series. This follows Aelin on her quest to reclaim her kingdom, and this has a plot which was actually mostly distinct from previous books, which I liked, and it had all the characters you could want, or in my case, not want. I liked that this book was set in like a new setting. It was very much based on like the ocean and islands, and I thought that made it distinct from previous books in the series in a way that I really appreciated. But I still get the impression that this book could be concentrated down into fewer, shorter books. I really think a much more vicious editor was needed for this series, and I'm not a fan of when you look at a series on a shelf and you can see that the later books in the series are so much bigger than previous ones. I just think that reeks of poor planning on the author's part, and that is very much present in this series. I think maybe 20% of all of the books could have just been completely edited out, and as a result they would have been so much more concise and interesting and just stronger generally. And also, speaking of planning, we return to my general gripe about this series, that it could have been done better. And I did actually get the impression from this book that it was slightly better plotted and paced than previous books, but I'm not sure if that's actually the case or if it was just me not noticing, because I was reading this book for the first time and then the other 4 books in the series were rereads for me. But I am leaning towards it was probably just I didn't notice. And I did actually really like the ending of this book. I thought it was a nice juicy cliffhanger that really left me interested and wanting to read on, and I just don't think previous cliffhangers in this series have been on that same level for me. I mean, to be completely honest, I did know it was coming. I was spoiled on the ending way before I read this book. It's the perils of scrolling through Throne of Glass memes on Instagram when you haven't finished the entire series yet. So that's on me, but I did still like the ending. I do think the setup for the ending was quite weak. I think it involved a lot of overreactions to things which seemed illogical, but what they led to was quite solid, I will say. But I want to talk about the magic system of this series, and I don't think I've touched on this in previous wrap-ups because it's only at this point in the series with this book that like all of the characters who have magic know about it and are using it on a regular basis. So this feels like the first bit where the magic series has taken centre stage in some regard. But I will also say that because the use of magic in this series now seems quite normal and expected for a lot of the characters, I think the author was struggling with like how to make it still epic. So what she seems to have done in this book is introduce loads of rules and like risks of using your magic, which like never existed, were never mentioned before, and seem very out of place to suddenly be introduced now. The whole metaphor of the magic system and how individual magic users use their powers is quite confusing. It's spoken of being like a well inside you and you sort of have to dive deep in the well to access your power, but then the well could run dry and you could use up all your power and that's bad. But also if you break through the bottom of the well, there's more magic down there, but then if you use that magic up as well, that's also bad. And that metaphor is used a lot in the book. And it's this endless cycle in the book of when people use their magic of they'll start using their magic, they'll worry about running out of their magic, they'll dive deep into the well, finish up their magic, oh no they've run out of magic, oh dear, then they'll realise they have more power, then they'll use up that extra power and then they'll be completely wiped out and vulnerable and weak. But then 5 minutes later they'll just like slyly be using their magic again, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And this happens numerous times just in the one book. It was very frustrating to read about because the first time it happened I thought, well, that's dumb, I don't really like how they did that. But then it would happen again for like another character within the same scene, or the next time there was a big magic battle it would happen to several characters, and then the next time someone used their magic it would happen to them as well. And I was like, guys, I think you're just not using your magic correctly, or more likely it's not written very well. And Dorian's powers in this in particular really confused me because he's first introduced as having like ice powers, and I thought, oh, that's interesting because it's the opposite of Aelin, which has fire powers and he has ice powers, and I was like, oh, they mirror each other, that's nice. But in this book, he can pretty much just do whatever is needed of him at the time. He seems to have an endless random array of powers, as do actually all of the magic users in this. It's very convenient. No matter what they're needed to do in that scene, somehow one of them will be able to do it with magic. And then the way that that undermines the plot, in that it's very hard to put them in any sort of peril because they can just solve it immediately with random magic powers, means that the magic system needs to be brought to new heights, which means that there's a lot more digging deep into their magic to reach the bottom of the well, etc, etc, and it just feeds into itself. I don't think it was very well thought out. Next are the characters. As usual, don't really like them. I think that any new character who's introduced with any kind of differing characterization to other characters is then almost immediately changed and made more bland and similar to other characters. So Elide, who was introduced in the, I can't remember at this point, third or fourth book, I thought, oh, she's interesting because she's like cowardly, and that makes her different to all of the other characters who are just generally like, oh, I'm so brave, I could do anything, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but it's very boring and repetitive. And then, hey, guess what, in this one, she's like suddenly grown a backbone out of nowhere. There's no development, she just switches into another kind of character completely, which is boring because they're all that kind of character. And all of the relationships between the characters are what I would describe as aggressively heterosexual. I mean, believe it or not, Sarah J Maas, it's possible to exist without being drawn into a convenient male-female romance. I mean, I don't know if anyone's told you this, I might be blowing your mind here, but it does happen. Not in this world though. It's kind of ridiculous how literally all of the major characters are just drawn in to convenient relationships. And they may be convenient, but they don't make any sense and I don't like them. And at this point, I'm just very over it. And all of the new Fae male characters in this book, I guess they're not new because they were in one of the previous ones. I literally can't stand them. They're so similar, I hate them all. Moving on. But secondly, I'm picturing them as being played by like the same actor who's just like putting on a different wig to play different characters. I cannot tell the difference between them at like 98% of the book. They're all so unnecessary. And Manon and Dorian? No, you're ruining her. She used to be cool and she sucked in this book. You ruined my favourite character. So I am giving this book 2 stars. And like I said before, it's not great, but it's fun, and that's pretty much all I have to say on it. The only thing is, next I have to read Tower of Dawn, which is all about fucking Cole. And it's just, I think it's just going to be like 800 pages of him wandering around a desert being annoying, and I so do not want to read it. But I will read it, and then I will finish the series. And I will never forgive Cole for the misery I am sure he is about to cause me. Okay, the next book is the last thing I read in 2020, and it is Glass Town by Isabel Greenberg. This is a graphic novel about Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Wuthering Heights, at the point in her life when all of the rest of her family has died, and she starts remembering the imaginary worlds she and her siblings created and like used to play games in. And Glass Town was the name of the imaginary world she and her brother Branwell particularly created together and used to imagine stories in. And so now as an adult, Charlotte kind of gets to revisit the world of Glass Town and see how the stories played out and what's left of them. And the story touches on themes of family and grief and love and growing up and growing apart and imagination and the power of stories and the way they can still hold sway over you several decades later. And this whole thing just had a very particular, like, bittersweet kind of vibe, which I can only really get from Isabel Greenberg books, and it was definitely in her other 2 previous graphic novels I've read, the Encyclopedia of Early Earth and the 100 Nights of Hero. They gave me very similar bittersweet vibes. And it's hard to explain exactly what happens in this book, because at the same time, I mean, not a lot happens, but we still cover a lot of emotional ground with Charlotte. I think actually that going in knowing a lot about this book would maybe act as a disservice to your reading experience of it. I mean, it's a graphic novel, it looks chunky, but it is actually a very quick read. So I think you should just dive into it and risk it and see if you'll like it, because I really think you will. And I didn't know much about the Brontes. I knew like the bare basics. One of them wrote Wuthering Heights, one of them wrote Jane Eyre. I still get confused about which one was which. But you don't need to know very much about the Brontes to appreciate this book at all. And actually I was like foolishly surprised by how much I enjoyed it anyway. I snuck this in as my very last read of 2020. I wanted to hit my 40 book goal for the year, and it was just really great. And I shouldn't have been surprised actually by how much I liked it, but this got 4 stars from me. Okay, next we have Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This was the first thing I read this year. I wanted to start off the year by rereading a previous favourite book of mine, and what can I say? It was as great the second time around as it was the first time. This is kind of a enemies to lovers romance between a Prince of England and the son of the US president, and how like a sort of fake PR friendship between them becomes something a lot more. And yeah, I just loved it. Again, it's fun and funny and exciting, and the 2 main characters are really great, and the relationship between them just seems so genuine, I thought, and nice, even if it is a bit heightened because it is a romance novel. This book also has quite a lot of emails and texts in it, sent between the 2 main characters, and to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of them. I was kind of tempted to like skim read them a bit, but that's just me not liking epistolary novels that much, and I'm pretty sure everyone else who read this loved that element. I do have a very short list of things I didn't like that much. Firstly, Prince Henry, who is the like English royal family love interest, he has an older brother called Prince Philip, and there is famously already a Prince Philip in the English monarchy. Like, he's still alive, like right now, he's a person that exists, and a simple Google for Prince Philip of England would have stopped this. I really don't understand how you can write a novel including like the English monarchy and change all their names to make it fictional, but then just leave a character called Prince Philip. That didn't make sense to me. But I know that is like the tiniest gripe ever. The only other thing I maybe wasn't such a fan of is Alex, the other protagonist, the like first son of America, I guess you'd call him. He has a sister and a best friend called June and Nora, and there's quite a lot of telling, not showing, about how amazing their dynamic is and how like unique and special these 2 women's brains are and how well they get on together as a trio. And I'm like, that's nice, but you could just show me that through dialogue and their actions and stop just like giving me long paragraphs telling me how amazing they are. Just show me. And actually on a couple of occasions the book did do a good job of showing us this and demonstrating it properly. So I thought it was a bit weird how there were also long paragraphs of like exposition around these characters. But that was basically like the only things I wasn't a huge fan of. The first time I read this, it was in late 2019, and I have to say that reading it now after the 2020 US presidential election, it's a lot less stressful and nerve-wracking than it was the first time, because obviously that has happened now and it turned out as well as it could have. So yeah, I would still highly recommend this. I'm not a massive romance reader, I don't read the genre very often, but I will say this is hyped for a reason, and yeah, you should check it out if that sounds interesting. Next, I'm going to briefly touch on Number 9 Dream by David Mitchell. I'm reading this for the Buzzwordathon reading challenge. This is for the January prompt to read a book with dream in the title, and I'm actually doing like a series of vlogs throughout the year on my Buzzwordathon reads, so I'm going to talk a lot more about this in a reading vlog coming out, I think 1 or 2 weeks after this video. So as a little teaser to make you interested in that vlog, I will say this is about a Japanese man called Eiji who goes to Tokyo to find his dad who has never been in his life. And should I tell you what I thought about it? I will. As another little teaser to make you want to go and watch that vlog, I will say that I was hugely disappointed by it. And actually I should therefore also mention Red Thread by Charlotte Higgins. This is the second book I'm reading in that reading vlog, and even if I wanted to I couldn't tell you much about it because I'm in the middle of it. It is a non-fiction book about mazes and labyrinths. But yes, you will hear a lot more about my thoughts on those 2 books in that reading vlog. Okay, so after I read Number 9 Dream, I wanted something like a quick palette cleanser, so I decided to reread Bloodlust and Bonnets by Emily McGovern. This is a graphic novel by the artist who does the My Life as a Background Slytherin comics on Instagram, and I first read it, I think it was late 2019, about the same time I read Red, White and Royal Blue actually. But unfortunately, instead of reiterating how much I enjoyed it, this reread just made me realise how annoying and not very good this book was. I have always described this book as an irreverent Regency romp with vampires and a telepathic eagle called Napoleon. And in it, our heroine Lucy teams up with Lord Byron and then this bounty hunter character called Sham to go and hunt England's most notorious high society vampire. And that sounds super fun, but it's also quite muddled and silly in a way that is less fun than annoying. The artwork in this book is quite basic, and that wasn't something that really bothered me. However, the dialogue is quite extensive and there's lots of like sarcastic back and forth, and I just thought it seemed like a lot more effort was put into the dialogue than the artwork, and those two elements just didn't really mesh well together for me. And sometimes it would feel like we had several panels in the comic dedicated to a moment which didn't need that much time dedicated to it, and then at other points things would move very quickly and it would feel like there was a panel, even a whole page missing. So the whole thing just felt a little bit unpolished, and unfortunately I only realised it the second time around. And also, speaking of the dialogue, yeah, there's a lot of sarcastic, snarky back and forth, and the whole book itself has this very irreverent, sarcastic tone to it, which ended up just being quite one note. It doesn't have anywhere to go, and so it doesn't. And all of the characters feel very similar. There are points where you can tell the author has tried to give them different characterizations, but ultimately any of that is sacrificed very often just for the whole overall irreverent, sarcastic vibe of the book. So that was like really annoying as well. And finally, I want to talk about the character of Sham, who is the like a vampire hunter slash bounty hunter kind of character. Sham very obviously and repeatedly refuses to give themselves a binary gender, to say whether they are like male or female. And there's several points where like someone asks them, are you a boy or a girl? And they say no. And then at another point someone says, oh, is it Mr. Sham or Ms. Sham? And they're like, yes. It's very obvious that they don't identify with a particular gender. However, Lucy and literally everyone in the book refers to them as she, and I'm like, fair enough, they could be non-binary and they use she, her pronouns, or that maybe they just use any pronoun, they don't really care about it, but they never say that. They refuse to say whether they identify as a man or a woman, and everyone just calls them she anyway, and it felt very icky. And it was odd because, I mean, they're not real. The author did all of this on purpose. This was a conscious decision on the part of the author to avoid them saying whether they feel like a man or a woman. But then it was also a conscious decision on the part of the author to make everyone else call them she anyway, and also a conscious decision to never give anyone a reason to do that. So that really annoyed me this time around. I mean, it annoyed me the first time around actually, but I totally forgot until I started reading this and I was like, oh my god, why are they still doing that? So this book has gone down in my estimations. The first time I read it I gave it 3 stars, now I've dropped that to 2 stars, and honestly I don't think I'll be keeping hold of this. I think I might just get rid of it at some point in the future, just because it really wasn't that good. And unfortunately this wrap up just goes downhill from there, because then we have Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. This is a translated Japanese book about a woman called Natsuki who's always felt like she didn't really fit in anywhere, and she was quite convinced as a child that she might be like an alien or a witch from another planet. And this was the worst book I've read in years. Horrible. Absolutely dreadful. It's only about 250 pages long, and I deeply detested about 230 of those pages. And the most succinct way to explain why I didn't like it is basically, I'll just list all the content warnings for you, which is like child abuse, sexual assault of a child, incest, murder, and cannibalism. I never felt like I should be arrested for reading a book until I read this. And honestly, if the police had shown up halfway through me reading this and arrested me for it, I'd be like, fair enough. I wouldn't even argue. It was just deeply disturbing on every level, and I realised as I was reading it that I kept sort of holding it like further and further away from my face. Like if I hold it over here, the book can't hurt me. And I finished it. I mean, it was a short book, but everyone said the end was crazy and the end was big. And I was like, okay, I will read this book. And the ending was certainly something. I, however, wish I had not finished it. I wish I'd never picked up in the first place, wish I'd never heard of it. And I would actually discourage people from reading this book. I just think it's that bad. I really hated it. 1 star. 1 star for this book. The one not terrible thing I will allow this book is its commentary on how the pressure of tradition impacts people in her society's lives, and its take on how prescribed a certain way of life is, and the dangers of being shunned by society if you don't appear to fit into a nice little category. However, I would say that her previous book, Convenience Store Woman, also covered this topic and I think did it a lot better. So don't read this, it was dreadful. Read Convenience Store Woman, which was a book I read from her last year and was like actually really good. So I don't know what happened between them, because I finished Convenience Store Woman and I thought, wow, that was really good. I'll try anything Sayaka Murata writes. And then I read Earthlings and I was like, no, I will not. I will be very careful when picking up her books in the future. But now we come to the last book of this wrap up, the holy grail at the end of it, which is The Girl Who Smelled Beads by Clementine Mamaria, and this was co-authored by Elizabeth Weil. And this is a memoir which covers Clementine's life as a child when she and her older sister Claire had to leave Rwanda, their home country, because of the civil war there, and it tells the story of the 6 years they spent sort of gradually moving through 8 different African countries before eventually going to the US. And the 8 countries they went through as refugees were, I think, Burundi, what is now the Democratic Republic of the Congo but was then called Zaire, Tanzania, Malawi, Mozambique, South Africa and Zambia. And this book is pretty much exquisite. It jumps back and forth quite a lot between her time as a child and travelling through these countries as a refugee, and then her as a teenager and then later an adult in the US. And at first, when I first started the book, I wasn't sure how I liked this jumping, but it actually really, really works. It's so well structured as a book, I thought. And it's also, I mean, obviously a very, very emotional book. She goes through such horrors and hardships with her sister, and it's all just laid out on the page for you. It was a very hard book to read, but actually I thought the ending was even harder because it's not a forever happy ending. She didn't just go to therapy and get over her trauma. She's not happy and carefree. I got the impression that her writing the book was meant to be maybe a therapeutic thing for her to help come to terms more with her trauma and all the things she's lived through. But because the act of writing is the goal, we don't see any results of that within the book itself. We don't get to see if it changed her at all or it brought her any peace or sense of release. Once I was quite far into this book and was like properly absorbed in it, because it is a very absorbing and compelling book, I realised that it's quite an angry book underneath it all. It's not an obvious theme, but it's a very strong theme. There's the anger she felt as a child and that you feel on behalf of her, that her world is just upended and she has no control over anything. And as a child, she tries to take back some control in like various ways and try and reclaim her sense of autonomy and of being an individual person. And then there's also anger at the fact that she shouldn't have had to do that in the first place. And then obviously like it never really works. She's constantly being moved around by forces bigger than herself. She doesn't really have any say, any control over anything that happened to her as a child. And then she's very much still angry as a teenager when she comes to the US, I think when she's 13, because it's like another world. It's like she's gone to another planet and she just can't relate to anyone, and no one can really relate to her either, just because of what she's been through. And actually, quite a few of the unjustly negative reviews this has on Goodreads mention her anger as like the thing they didn't like. And I'm reading them and I'm thinking, if anybody in the world has a reason to be angry, it's Clementine Mamaria. I mean, are you serious? You're saying that because she was angry and ungrateful when she came to America, it ruined your reading experience? Like, get a grip! What's wrong with you? She is allowed to be angry forever, and literally no one gets to tell her to stop because it's making you uncomfortable. But I don't want to make it sound like, you know, there's rage emanating from every page in this, because that's not. And while it's not like an all-time favourite book, it was really, really good, but I'm having trouble rating it, and I've never found it hard to rate a memoir before. It's always been, like until now, kind of an easy process to work out whether I wanted to give something 3 or 4 or 5 stars. But ultimately, any like shortcomings of this book do not reflect poorly on Clementine and her experiences, but on the history and the conflict and the circumstances and people that caused her to suffer in the first place. She is doing her best, and I'm so glad I read this book. I knew absolutely nothing about Rwanda or its history or the Civil War in particular before I read this, and actually, even though I've learned quite a lot from reading this book, it's by no means a textbook or a history book. And actually, you get about 100 pages into it before she says anything concrete along the lines of, oh, X group were fighting Y group because of Z, and then they did this to each other. You're very much going into it not really knowing what's happening. You know what's happening about as much as the young Clementine does. So you sort of share this childlike ignorance with her throughout the beginning of the book, which I think was a really good way to pull you in and make you empathize with her, because you're confused and scared all at the same time with her, and together you really get to experience the sort of overarching atmosphere of like dread and fear and uncertainty. Aside from the original infographic I think I saw on Bookstagram, which listed this as like a possible reading recommendation, I haven't seen anyone talk about this on Instagram or BookTube, so it's on your radar now, and know that it comes with a very high recommendation from me. I think a lot more people should be reading this book. So that was my entire wrap up. I'll say it was definitely an interesting period of reading for me. Lots of ups and downs in very quick succession most of the time. So thank you very much for watching. I'm hoping I've introduced you to maybe a couple of titles you hadn't heard of and are now intrigued to try. Let me know what the best and or worst thing you read recently was, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!